Brezhnev said, in Stalin's period, terror. In Khrushchev's period, too much change and instability. So he didn't want to bring so much of change. He was far more conservative. So Brezhnev was the next General Secretary and the most important leader. He ruled between 1964 and 1982. It's a long rule. And he was not known to experiment anything. But when the system is decaying and you don't innovate, what happens? Things become worse. Brezhnev did not want to change, but by not willing to change, he contributed to the deterioration. This is one statistic. By 1987, USSR had 1 lakh computers compared to 5 million sold annually in the US. What does this show? This is a huge decline in science and technology, innovation. At one time, USSR competed with USA in space, but now it is nowhere near. We can say in the post-industrial world, or in an economy where the services came to dominate, USSR was down. This is one way of looking at it. Another way is that when USSR did well, it was using the old technology, old methods, industrialization, and then did well. But when others were in a position to innovate and move ahead, USSR was not in a position to do that because it was not a free society, not free. So innovation is not possible. So S&T down. Okay. And another thing is Brezhnev was doing, involved in many international conflicts because he felt that as a leader of the communist country, he should fight capitalism. So he was involved in many countries. So Cold War and deterioration, arms race increased. So USSR was trying to play as it played an international role where the domestic economy was doing very, very badly. So in the end, you can see the economic and political system that USSR chose could not really compete with capitalist and democratic system, and more so when USSR had international ambitions, involved in arms race. And one such thing happened during Brezhnev's time was in 1979. Afghanistan, invasion of Afghanistan. Afghanistan invasion was like America's Vietnam. So it bled USSR economy, and internal economy deteriorated. So political system by 1982 was in a political and economic system was in a very bad position. And after that, two people came to power. They did not live long enough because they were very old, because of which Mikhail Gorbachev came to be the party general secretary and the leader. He had been the ruler or the president between 1985 to 1991. By 1991, USSR collapsed. So the end of Cold War took place by 1991. In essence, what happened was that Gorbachev saw the problem, but in trying to solve the problem, he caused the system to crash. Okay, here we will stop and wait for your questions. Okay, now tell me, what do you think of the overall situation? What I am saying is that the system as such is inefficient. It can never take on capitalism plus democracy. So it is inherently weak. It is not any one person's making. What do you say about this? You want to say something, Gayatri?
Agreed.
Okay. What are the other problems? Sunil, what do you say?
Sir, I understand that individual ambitions cannot take place in communism, but given the state sponsorship, we can push the innovation. I mean, people supporting the innovation for the state, and state is sponsoring that, so that innovation is possible. But why wasn't it, I mean, done in that period?
Okay, you mean innovation is possible even in a controlled economy?
Not the individual innovation, but the
State-sponsored innovation.
Right.
That is true. State can support innovation. But you think, can it go on forever? State supported innovation, and that is why USSR achieved certain things. But can it go on forever? Remember, these issues are important to know what is going to be the fate of China. In an unfree society, how long innovation can go on? As of now, China is good at innovation. You know, following somebody's methods is different from doing something completely new, which is innovation. So state-sponsored science is possible. Can there be state-sponsored innovation in an unfree ambience? That is one. Next. That is an issue. Next. Deepika, are you following? What do you say?
Yes, sir. Sir, I think they have used their resources for the wrong purposes, like arms race.
Arms race, exactly. Arms race. Used resources for wrong purpose. But how could they use for wrong purpose? Because there was no democratic control. In a democracy, people are responsible. Their leaders are responsible to the people. They had to be reasonably popular. Then they went for prestige, global leadership, though they were not good enough to begin with. They were not strong, but they had global ambitions. This is one. Next.
Innovation is a cumulative. Innovation is a result of many cumulative things. Okay. So in that, individual freedom has a role.
Freedom has a role in innovation.
Has a role. Yes. Because how people think is a product of how they have been
allowed to think.
Allowed to think.
Allowed to think is important to really be innovative. Innovation is a serious issue. So what are the problems that USSR faced have implications to what may happen to China?
Simple analogy, sir. Simple analogy. In home also, for a child to perform good, he should be free of any
Exactly.
violence.
It should be free of.
So we
That's
can extend that analogy to
That's true.
nation also.
And even economic performance also. Individual incentives matter. There are no individual incentives in economy. Collectivization of agriculture, nationalization of industry. So I would say the first problem is economy. That poor economy was being supported by terror, was being maintained through terror. Okay. And then what the terror does is that it doesn't pay attention to various parts. You know, it's a republic, but some republics got neglected. They don't have a say. It's all centralized. So USSR contained many things, not only socialism, but the fact that there were many nationalities within USSR. So all these things would come out in the end, all these problems. Economic problem, political suppression, arms race, innovation. And also political experimentation also is difficult. Different states experimenting different. We'll come to that, but you can. Karim, you have something to say? So you are on the move or Karim?
No, sir. Network issue is there.
Okay.
So our video I have done.
Fine.
Sir, are we comparing with
Rajesh?
China?
Rajesh, you have something to say? Huh?
No, sir. I missed the last classes, sir.
Okay, fine.
Sir, are we comparing with China in this current time?
No. But I'm just saying it has some implications. That's all.
But isn't there a huge difference with?
We will look into that.
Okay, fine.
Okay, now come to Gorbachev. See, first thing is, Gorbachev is not the only one who saw the problem. It is not that nobody knew the problem, only Gorbachev knew, and somehow he became the leader, and then he did all these things. It is that for quite some time, many were coming to think that the system was not delivering. Okay, so what is important is for the leadership position go to a reformer who knew things, who wanted to change, and Gorbachev got that opportunity. Gorbachev introduced. He knew that the system was not working, and it had to be completely changed. Okay, but then he did not think the whole system would collapse. He was not ready for it. He did not intend to crash USSR. He only wanted to reform. There was no doubt about it. So what he did was he introduced what is called glasnost. Glasnost means openness. People started speaking openly, criticizing against Stalin or against many previous regimes, against economy, against communism. Okay, there were lively debates. And then perestroika, which meant restructuring of the economy as well as political system. Economic restructuring included subsidies are cut, some production is privatized, 40% of agriculture returned to individuals from collectivization. Small private plots were permitted even before, and they had been doing much better. So now more. So he introduced political reforms, economic reforms, especially when it was not doing because of Afghan crisis and arms race. USSR faced this arms race even more severely under Reagan's time, during Reagan's term. Reagan went for all kinds of projects like Star Wars, and USSR went about spending more militarily during Brezhnev's time and even after Brezhnev's time. And then Afghan crisis. Afghan crisis was part of USSR spreading itself across the globe as a part of the Cold War. So all these created problems. And in 1986, Chernobyl disaster exposed dysfunctions of the system. It showed how the system could function so inefficiently. First, they tried to cover it up and they couldn't. The damage was extensive. They couldn't contain it fast. Okay, so it is in this context Gorbachev was trying to reform. And some of the political structures that he changed included Congress of People's Deputies, where 1,500 out of the total of 2,250 are directly elected. So direct election to this like this was not there before. And then a Supreme Soviet, that was a standing parliament, elected, and its debates were televised live. So these changes took place in 1989, and later the monopoly of Communist Party also ended. So it means he introduced elections, openness, and then ending of party monopoly. Okay. So when these changes were going on in the USSR, East European countries thought this was the occasion to rebel against the USSR. Okay. And that is what happened in what are called 1989 revolutions. Okay. Okay. You can ask any questions on Gorbachev. You think how could he come to power, or what is the mystery, or is it like that? Because at one time I felt that somehow he came to power, nobody expected, and he went about doing it. It was not so. The Communist Party was divided. There were some people who were reformist thinking, and they identified Gorbachev to be quite a honest person and who would bring some change. But of course, nobody thought that he would do these things, and even Gorbachev didn't think that such things would crash the system. Okay, you know, nobody. One lecture, one professor says it seems there was one book written long ago, but except for that book, nobody expected the end of Cold War soon. Nobody expected peacefully USSR would dissolve itself. No historian, nobody expected it. It was all over by 1991. It started in 1917 and over by 1991. Okay. No, please.
Sir, what is the image that Gorbachev has in Russia, sir? Now, how
What
do
is
people
that? What
perceive?
is? What is?
What is the image that Gorbachev has now? Current, how history is judging him?
History is judging him as a great person. The world admires him.
The
But Russians are not
contemporary
sure.
Russians,
Russians
yes,
are
the
not sure about Gorbachev's role. Russians are divided, not so popular. But outside Russia, he's popular. The world, all over the world, he's popular. He's not popular within Russia. Okay. So, do you think he should have done everything to retain the system?
Did not understand the question. Did not understand the question.
He didn't understand. No.
I did not understand your question.
Do you think that he should have done everything to retain the system? Should something be preserved at any cost?
No.
Or should it let it go? Should he let it go when it was bankrupt? What do you say, Sunil?
So we should let it go.
Why?
Because even if we try, it won't be possible to get control of. Sir, but I didn't understand how did this policy led to collapse of system?
We'll come to that. How did this policy cause the collapse? Fine, we'll come to the events. Next, but what is your idea? Should he, when he thinks that the system is bankrupt and he is not able to reform, should he control it through force or should he let it collapse?
He must have had experience from the previous leaders who tried to do whatever to sustain the system, but they all failed. I mean, it ultimately led to suffering of people. So he didn't try, I think.
That's true.
Even if he had tried to, it would have meant that he is not reforming, but continuing with the old regime and again the suffering for the people.
That is true. Very good. Very good. But then, under such circumstances, leader would be losing his power. So should he be prepared?
I think people like Gorbachev are not motivated by power. No, sir. Intention defines their action.
That's true.
So
Gorbachev was not motivated by power. He wanted to empower people, not himself. Gorbachev was an extraordinary man.
Sir, only some part of the seats are elected and some are, I think, nominated or something. Why is that? Why are
some are elected by certain bodies, some are directly elected. It's like that. There are certain organizations appoint some, and some are directly elected by the people. So Gorbachev went for reforms where huge chunk were directly elected. Okay. Now next.
Respect to the situation. Respect to the situation, generally status quo is expected to be in control. Then because if that is left out, if a ruler has no control over the situation, nobody can expect what is going to happen. Then obviously people, he may think that status quo is better to, there is some control which is better than no control.
You are right, but when we understand that some control is worsening people's welfare, should we have it? Gorbachev's dilemma, no world leader faced, and the way he handled, he just simply let it happen. He could have used power and made things much, much worse. He didn't.
Not going back to the past, but making intention to make it new possibility. Not going, instead of repeating what others have done, he wanted to make
Do
it turn
something
into
new.
new possibility.
When he was failing and he allowed it to fail. But not many would do that, because it involves losing one's own power, which he was prepared to. He didn't think in terms of national glory. I mean, he didn't want that this to happen, but he didn't want to keep it at any cost. It is like that. Okay. Now let us go through the.
Sir, is Gorbachev inspired from Reagan economic policies? Like there was a wave.
No. Reagan contribution was making the USSR economy much worse. It is like that. Not that Reagan's economic policies inspired Gorbachev, because even before Reagan, capitalism was doing well. South Korea doing well, West Germany doing well, capitalist world was doing well, and USSR was nowhere. So Gorbachev knew.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll say a few things about Gorbachev's background.
Sir, did he option to go and ask the assistance from USA? Like, did he try that?
He wanted to. Assistance in what sense?
So monetary assistance, like the Marshall Plan, the US aided the Europe that way.
Okay. Fine, we'll come to that. Gorbachev was son of a peasant. His grandparents, his village was invaded by Hitler, but again it was won over by the Soviets, so he was narrowly saved. And his father, I think, later became head of the collective. And Gorbachev knew the collectives were not working well. So Gorbachev getting to know many things, but good family background, in the sense affectionate and brought up well. And he went to a good college where, within the constraints of USSR, that was Moscow University, there was more openness. And he was bright, intelligent, hardworking, and more importantly, honest, non-corrupt, because of which he was promoted, was a good student and also a good, honest person. So because of which he was promoted. And many critical books were available to communist leaders, which were not available to others, because communist leaders were supposed to know what was going on, even the criticism of communism. So like that, many critical books were available, but the difference between Gorbachev and others was that Gorbachev read those books. And Gorbachev was also influenced by European communists and their views on Marxism and Leninism. And he was also associated with the ideas that influenced 1968 Prague Spring and similar events. So Gorbachev was a well-informed person, well-informed, intelligent, young. And there are some people within the Communist Party who felt that this man might change things for better. Okay. So that was how he came to power, and these were all his general assets. And also his attitude towards women was also very good. Non-authoritarian, non-abusive, treating people equally. He had a similar relationship with his wife. So in that sense, Gorbachev was much more well-informed person. Okay. And so he wanted to do these things. For example, he said he won't intervene to save governments in Eastern Europe. Last time what happened during Khrushchev time, when they did something, USSR sent its army. But Gorbachev explicitly said he won't intervene. What he meant was the governments should reform so that such rebellions won't be needed. But even by then, some changes were going on. For example, in Poland, Poland was the one who was struggling for change. So first, let us see how many countries were there in the Eastern Europe under Soviet influence. So Poland is one country. Next, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. Okay. All these five are important. Yugoslavia, in Yugoslavia, socialism developed independently. So Yugoslavia was not a satellite of USSR. So these five East European countries. In Poland, things had been changing much before. We would say road to 1989 is a long one in Poland. Solidarity, a trade union, became powerful. Its leader was Lech Walesa. Nearly 1/3 of the people joined Solidarity. In 1981, martial law imposed and leaders jailed. Okay. In 1988, Solidarity was restored. Elections held. And in September 1989, a non-communist became prime minister. So this was the change in 1989. But it took nearly 10 years for Poland to elect one non-communist leader. So that was the change in Poland. And Hungary also was following different economic policies since 1968. Its own economic policy since 1968. And had contested elections in 1985. Contested elections means contested. It doesn't mean non-communists were there. But within that, contested elections, 1985. So it was better. But said in 1989, I mean, it stopped to prevent East Germans from crossing to Austria. See, Hungary stopped Germans maybe coming like this to Austria. So Austria like this. So people can move like this. Okay, because so this led movement to I think this didn't give, not a company, Czechoslovakia. Okay. Fine, I'll explain. So, Germans in the communist bloc were allowed by Hungary finally to Austria. From Austria, they can go anywhere. Okay. So it means free entry was started in Hungary. And next in East Germany, decided in November 1989 to allow free passages to West Germany. And this created a mass movement of people crossing the Berlin Wall. And finally, the wall itself was pulled down. And in October 1990, two countries merged, East Germany and West Germany. This merger was allowed because it was Gorbachev. Helmut Kohl was the German Chancellor and American President was George Bush. And Gorbachev, so Berlin Wall fell in 1989, and by 1990, Germans were united. German unification took place. Okay. And then demonstrations began in November 1989 in Czechoslovakia. This is about Czechoslovakia. Government, 1989, government resigned in December. No lives were lost. Havel became the first post-communist president of Czech Republic in 1990. And then new governments came to power in Bulgaria and Romania. So these are 1989 revolutions. The entire Eastern Bloc, one after the other, moved away from communism. Okay, because Gorbachev did not send troops to stop that. Poland took a lot of time, but by the time of Czechoslovakia, the time was shortened, and meanwhile, Berlin Wall collapsed, and then after that, unification took place. Okay. We know now that Gorbachev allowed unification with the promise that NATO would not be expanded further east. Okay, and also he also wanted financial help from Germany, and Germany did help. Okay, but these things were leading to independence demands within USSR. For example, next independence demand, it is here, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. So independence demand did not stop with the Eastern European countries, but they spread to these three Baltic republics. These Baltic republics were independent between 1918 and 1940. 1940 when Stalin ceased. Okay. And in 1990, there was a Gorbachev himself was ordered a crackdown in Lithuania, which declared independence. So Gorbachev could peacefully allow East European countries to move away, but he was too shocked when Baltic republics also wanted to be independent. So for some time he did this crackdown, okay, but definitely not much violence here. But it showed that there are issues within USSR, and once things are eased, maybe republic itself won't stay, or the union itself won't survive. Okay, and then there are also some other republics which wanted to be independent. So what Gorbachev wanted was that he also thought of restructuring the entire thing into Union Soviet Sovereign Republics with a more decentralized structure. So that was the plan. So Eastern Europe gone, Berlin Wall no more, East Germany gone. Now Baltic republics want the secession, want to secede, and certain republics don't want to be part of USSR. And if they're apart, loose arrangement is going to be made, and Communist Party no more power, has no more power. So it is in that context. In 1991, CPSU hardliners staged a coup in August. What was this coup? Gorbachev was in a retreat house, and he was arrested, house arrested there. He was asked to resign, but he did not resign. And so coup leaders said that Gorbachev was sick, and so they were taking power. So that was the coup. But that coup was not successful. No support from the people, and no support from the army. Some part of the army supported, but the entire army was not with the coup leaders. And Boris Yeltsin, the elected head of the Russian Republic, defied. See, Russian defiance is more serious than defiance of other republics. So Russia did not support, and many people gathered in Moscow. They were against the coup. There was army, and army did not try to stop the protesters. It means that the army did not support the coup. And the coup leaders realized that they won't be successful. Okay, and very soon Gorbachev released. So coup was averted, but it turned out that coup was the last development that would lead to collapse of USSR itself. How did that happen? During the coup, Yeltsin became more powerful. It turned out that it seemed that Yeltsin saved Gorbachev. And then Yeltsin knit, when some republics were not willing to be a part of any common federation, Yeltsin knit a new entity called Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS. Only 11 out of 15 republics opted to join. Baltic states refused and Ukraine refused. Which means republics of USSR did not want USSR as it was used to be, which Gorbachev also realized, and some didn't want to have anything to do with it. And so by the time CIS formed, it meant that USSR technically was no more. So Gorbachev was no more leader of USSR. So here one can say, why did Yeltsin do this? Usually, a federation is preserved because of the dominant republic. But Yeltsin, when Yeltsin was not trying for USSR, definitely USSR won't have future. So Gorbachev thinks Yeltsin did it as a way of removing Gorbachev from power. Okay, so Yeltsin played a role in restoring Gorbachev. Yeltsin played a role in the collapse. But if others were different, maybe a different kind of USSR might have been possible for some time, or it's simply the collapse would only be delayed, would have been delayed. So it is simply, it is like a pack of cards falling one after the other. Tell me, is this clear to you? Deepika, is it clear?
Yes, sir. Sir, was Gorbachev
Finally, there was no USSR. It was like that.
Sir,
So do
was
you
the,
see, it is not only socialism, but nationalism also played a role. All of them were put together by force, and when the force was removed, there was nothing to glue them. Deepika.
Sir, did Gorbachev know that it is going to fail and he was trying to move towards democracy and his opponents feared so? And that, is it that what has happened or something else?
You mean to say, didn't Gorbachev know this?
I meant to say, was he trying to move towards democracy?
Yes, he was trying to move towards democracy. He was trying to move towards democracy as well as capitalism, both economic reforms as well as political reforms.
So the communists brought him down because they didn't want democracy.
Exactly. They didn't want democracy, plus they saw the threat to USSR itself. They were not wrong, but it is just that people did not want the old structure.
So it is just for power that the communists have fought.
Exactly, power or ideology, whatever. But there were some people who didn't want. But it is not that anybody thought that things would collapse like this.
So Gorbachev knew, but and he tried to do something and it did not work.
Exactly. In essence, Gorbachev knew the problem. He wanted to reform. It was simply non-reformable. You try to do anything, it will collapse. That is in essence, that is what USSR was. Try to do anything, it would collapse. It cannot be repaired. It was so bad.
So before he came to power itself, he might have known.
Before he came to power, he thought reform was possible. Remember, he was not trying to crash USSR. No. He thought it could be changed. But now people think he was too naive. The problem was so serious that it cannot be reformed. Gorbachev thought reform was possible, but it could not have been reformed. That is what most people think. Either you maintain it through force or leave it. It cannot be reformed. Okay. Any other questions?
Sir, how that the president of Russia you conveyed that he was responsible slightly for, I mean, collapse part. I mean, I missed that. I think, sir, I had some.
That's okay. You can tell me. How did
how was he responsible for the collapse, sir?
How was he responsible for the collapse? Because he initiated these changes, and it is these changes that brought down the whole thing. In that he was responsible. If he hadn't initiated, then it would have continued for many more years. But things would have been far worse. It's like, he initiated the changes. That changes brought down the whole structure. Because earlier it was maintained through terror. So do you see how vulnerable these systems are? Chinese also fear the same thing. If we just ask people to speak, they don't know what they will speak. It is like that.
At least Gorbachev did not have president. Now that they have president, they
Exactly. Gorbachev didn't have president, but these people have president. So they don't want to happen to China what happened to USSR. That is their problem. That is the issue.
And sir, this explains all the projects that China is going, I mean, BR and all that.
China maybe?
Sir, this explains the reason why China is going for enormous projects across the world.
Going for which projects?
Sir, BRI and all that projects.
That's fine. Because they have to do economically so well. If they have to do economically so well and politically, they should maintain tight control. But how long will they control is an issue. How long will they maintain this control is an issue. But
How long
essentially, they have USSR in mind. There is no doubt about it.
Sir, how long that growth is also sustainable?
Exactly. How long that growth will sustain, that is an issue. That is an issue. So these are the problems with communism. Anyway, 3 countries that supported the coup were North Korea, Cuba, and China. Okay.
Sir,
So they didn't want Gorbachev. Gorbachev was a threat. Razu, please.
sir, why didn't USSR included China as a satellite also?
China was an independent country. China did not get through USSR. China was independent and Yugoslavia also was independent. They made it to communism independently. You mean ideologically influenced by Lenin, but not politically controlled by Stalin. Just like that. China was different. And in the Eastern Europe, Yugoslavia also was different. Yugoslavia also was, Tito was the leader, and later you will see, he also formed a non-aligned movement. So Cuba was independent, Yugoslavia was independent, China was independent. But those countries were not independent. Communism was forced on them. Nor republics of USSR were independent. Communism was forced on them. In fact, communism was forced on Russia only, that we have seen. One man, Lenin, and after that Stalin. Okay. So maintained through terror, and once the terror is removed, just collapsed. Okay. Next, we'll do LG.
Sir, this explains the reason why Stalin was so, Lenin, Stalin, all those were so cruel. Can you say that?
Yes, Stalin, that's true. Communism requires so much of suppression. Communism, as they followed, requires suppression. But who said communism should be that? So Stalin cannot be forgiven, because who told Stalin that should be so? Lenin partly contributed. Even Lenin cannot be forgiven. But Lenin, I have some sympathy for Lenin, because at the time of Lenin's death, it was free economy. So Lenin seemed to have realized that there were problems with this ideology. But we don't know if Lenin lived long enough, he would have changed.
Sir, had it been Trotsky who succeeded?
Trotsky didn't differ much from this. See, basically, people think Stalin's atrocities were wrong. Okay, they are right. But the Stalin's atrocities were also done because of ideology of communism. Who can do collectivization with the consent of the farmers? That is not possible. That collectivization led to so many deaths in China also. That's what Mao did. So when you include, just one second, when you include collectivization as a project of communism, violence is inevitable. And moreover, how do you eliminate other political parties, rivals, and how do you, when there is no openness? So atrocities are likely to come, because in modern democracy, in liberal democracies, you have legislature, executive, judiciary, multiple parties, they criticize each other, they expose free press. Because of all these things, people are protected. But there is no such protection, there is no such division of powers, there is no separation of powers in a communist system. So it is vulnerable for abuse. So Stalin was riding the system which Lenin created. So it was Lenin who removed free press, All parties banned, introduced collectivization, powerful secret police, communist, Bolshevized army. Who did that? Lenin did it. Only thing that can be said about Lenin is that at the time he died, economic system was different. It was called a new economic policy. So private enterprise was thriving. So it means that had Lenin lived long enough, maybe communism would have been different. Only that much we can say. So Stalin introduced this brand of collectivization and everything much later in 30s. But then that ideology was given by Lenin. Who ever thought that the collectivization was communism? I don't think you can trace it to Marx. No. Marx did not say that. I mean, I said, that's what I said. I don't think you can trace it to Marx. To Marx, communism is supposed to end alienation. As a part of ending alienation, abolition of private property should be there. Not that the private property should be abolished and that should be the goal. No. Same thing about religion. When the suffering ends, religion naturally is supposed to end. Not that you attack churches and then remove religion. What kind of communism is that? So what Marx said, they were supposed to evolve as humanity evolved. So this is an extremely violent thing. How can one justify it in the name of Marxism? So these were definitely wrong and dangerous experiments by irresponsible people. Okay. Any questions?
Sir,
we'll do this first. Okay. Yeltsin became leader and he ruled Russian Federation between 1991 to 99. And during the Gorbachev era, Yeltsin belonged to a radical side. Gorbachev was pulled in two different directions, one by radicals and another by conservatives. Yeltsin is radical, faster democratic, faster reforms. So Yeltsin was more popular. So by 1991, Yeltsin was popular and Gorbachev was not. Because Gorbachev was still praising a communist party. Gorbachev was still a member of Communist Party, whereas Yeltsin by then resigned from the Communist Party. But as he attempted abrupt transition to market economy, many wrong things took place. Mismanagement of privatization. You know what happened? Massive public sector assets were simply sold to certain individuals at low prices. So what emerged in the transition was a powerful oligarchs. They are the people who had a lot of wealth, the wealth created out of acquiring the state-owned assets. Okay. And he had a disastrous war with indigenous Muslim Chechens. So even within the Russian Republic, there were problems and now, you know, after 99, Putin became the leader. And currently Putin is the president. And the impact of communism is so much, even now, Russia is not democracy. It is still under authoritarian rule of Putin. Whereas Eastern European countries transitioned more successfully towards democracy. Because people are not trained in democratic process, decentralization, peaceful electoral process, media. So there was so much of chaos during Yeltsin's time, corruption, and to control that, Putin came and Putin became popular, and now he is very much authoritarian. Okay, he's very corrupt. People don't know now how to get rid of Putin. So this shows that how damaging communism can be over a long term. Okay. Now let us do China. Okay. Mao died in 1976. And before that, what was called a Gang of Four, which included Mao's wife, Zhang Qing, and her associates, and Lin Biao, did many atrocities while Mao was alive. Mao, during the last phase of his life, his mind was not working properly and couldn't comprehend, and others were leading on his behalf, and his wife played a very important role. But all of them were put on trial, and power came to Deng Xiaoping Deng Xiaoping. He leads till his death in 1987. In 1997. Okay. He was a prisoner of Cultural Revolution. And then it was he introduced free market economy and right to farm some land. Okay. So it was Deng's reforms that led to huge economic growth. Economic growth between 1994 to 1984 2008 was 9%. So huge population growth. It is from 80s onwards, from Deng's reforms. Okay. So it was not capitalism that made China, it was not communism that made China powerful. It was capitalism, but under communist political control. It was not capitalism like the Western. So this you can say state-led capitalism, politically unfree, state-led enterprises, believed in trade, openness. Okay. Because China and US relations also changed. Nixon visited China in 1972 and it became WTO member in 2001. So China went for globalization, trade orientation, foreign capital, okay, because of which it created this growth. Okay. And its worry is that it should not go through what the USSR went through. But is it likely? One dissimilarity is that USSR was very huge, but China was not. China compared to USSR was not so huge. USSR was so much diverse, 15 republics, so many nationalities. But China is not so diverse. So it is not like collapse the way USSR collapsed, but then there can be a challenge to the Communist Party leadership. Communist Party may be wiped out. Communist Party leaders may face problems. And some nationalities or some people may give trouble. Some provinces. But it won't be like the collapse of USSR, because USSR's problem was not simply socialism, but also nationalism. USSR was suppressing nationalities, and all that opened up when Gorbachev freed up the system. Okay, so but still China has a problem. But as of now, under the present system, it became a very, very powerful country. Okay, so the age-old system, but opened up. So control plus economic freedom. Okay, some people think that economic freedom gave success because it was controlled. It was controlled. If it is like capitalism anywhere else, it won't have been successful. It won't be successful. Okay, so that is one argument. Okay. Okay, before we go to Japan, I'll stop, and then if you have any questions, you can ask. We have only a few minutes talk on Japan. Okay, so this is the end of Cold War.
Sir,
any questions now?
Yes, sir. Sir, when we compare Russia and China, Russia main reason of collapse was, as you said, economy. Secondary was nationalities.
That is true.
Okay, and they tried to introduce reforms, and ultimately it backfired and collapsed.
Good.
Coming to exactly. So coming to China, China doesn't want to. So China is similar to USSR.
Okay.
And reforms were introduced, but in a controlled manner.
Yes.
And it brought the many people out of poverty.
That's true. You are right.
Yes, sir. So now we compare with India and China. India, immature democracy. Capitalism was present.
But why should we compare? Why should we compare these two? What is it that you want in China that India should have?
At least India lifted the poverty, many people out of poverty. India is still persisting with poverty.
India should do that, but why Chinese way? And how is Chinese way possible?
Because having freedom, it's better it's better to live out of poverty.
So many countries don't have freedom, and they also have poverty. So many dictatorships are there. Just because oh, please, you can continue.
What I feel is poverty is worse than freedom.
Okay. But just because you go for a control, how can you say you will remove poverty? Who is preventing the government from removing poverty?
Yes, sir. Democracy is not working in a right manner. So control resign for at least for a particular period.
And what should they do? Suppose you remove freedom and you give power to Narendra Modi. What will he do? How will he remove poverty?
Like Deng. Like Deng reforms.
Deng's reforms can be introduced even now. Who will be opposed to it? And many countries removed poverty under relatively free conditions. The entire Europe. How about South Germany, East Germany? South Germany succeeded. North Korea, South Korea.
But sir, what I'm saying is India and China were similar during 1950s. More so. They're in both similar platforms. That's what I want. India and China were in similar platforms, same social conditions, same religious values, whatever it may be. So
you say they are similar. They may be economically backward, but India is more educated. English. There is.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Due to colonization, yes. But majority of the Indians, very few intellectuals, that too middle class, very few intellectuals were educated, as you said. As reforms were there, but it was not came through down. It was imposed upon by the British. But we can say China and India were in similar positions during 1960s time, those time. They did, the only thing they did better was.
Do you know how many millions died in China?
Lifting out of poverty.
How many millions died before Deng came to power?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is.
How many? Can you tell me?
Many of them died, sir, because of mob sponsors.
65 millions. 65 millions were killed. It was much more than World War I, World War II put together.
Yes.
Why should a nation go through such things?
Yes. But my thing.
No, do you create an authoritative structure by killing so many people? Why is it worth creating such a thing?
It's not, sir. That is wrong. You are correct. In this part, you are correct.
So that authority structure came through so much of violence.
But now they are in a...
What are they in? I don't know. What are they in it? Can we have a class like this in China? It is not possible.
Yes.
So what is it that they have?
Now they are ready to conquer the world through that. What do you call it?
What is conquering where a president is afraid of his own people and his own number two? What do they want by conquering?
Yes.
Can a president go to the college and ask students, please speak freely?
He cannot.
Then what power does he have? He doesn't have power. Can he call his party people, communist people, and open freely? This is what I think.
Yes, sir.
So in what sense the president has power?
Yes, sir. It's fine.
So
the only thing they lack is freedom, sir. Everything they have.
When they lack freedom, how can you say they have power?
Power defines goes through economy, military. Like
No. Power. In what sense somebody will say that these people have power? Just tell me one thing. Where is the power?
In my understanding, power comes through economy and military.
How does it come?
Through its people.
How? Basically, can a president say this is what I believe? Can he? No.
Yes.
The present president suffered under Mao. Something happened to his father. Now he is in a position to say anything against Mao? No.
Yes.
Can the number two tell freely about number one?
Yes.
Can students say this is what I think?
Yes.
So what is the power they have? They have enslaved themselves. That is not power. There is no power without freedom.
Yes.
We have seen how a number two was hit in public just because he disagreed with Mao. Finally jailed and died in a jail. Number two. And Mao's fear was that could be done to him. How can you say, how do you define power to say that this man has power? What is power without freedom?
Yes. In comparison to poverty and freedom, which one will you give more weight?
I don't know what is power here. Where is power? This is slavery. Mass enslavement. We should have the clarity to give proper names. Then you will know that this is not the way to live. That is not the way to live. In constant fear. We are human beings, not dogs. I don't know. I think dogs want freedom also. So we can't say we're dogs. We want to eat, we want to clothe, but not to be enslaved. So that is not a system which is worthy of comparison. The world should say have wealth, but we refuse to respect it. That is not the way to live. And if you think of yourself, please ask your own people and then come to us. You are hurt by our comments? Nice of you. Ask your people. So these are all wrong definitions of what constitutes power or what is power. Power is not about weaponry. Power is not to assault somebody. Power is freedom to pursue one's life, one's goals. So however much they achieve, we should never think whether it is worthy of emulation at all. It is not worthy of emulation. It is a rotten system. So these concepts need to be defined. What should power mean? That is the first thing we should define. So people have to work in a one-track mind in an economy, then they will do something. Anything that side, this side, they are monitored. And when you are successful, then you can be under attack. Like what is happening to certain huge computer companies. Okay. When a businessman disagrees, then we know for certain that he may end up in a jail. Essentially, number 2 is not free and number 1 is scared. Where is power? So we should get the concepts clearly. Mass enslavement, that's how I look at it. Okay, next last topic, Japan. You have something to ask? Okay.
Does it explain the US doesn't support BRI projects and all the sanctions?
No, we need to see that is such as China is like that. What should we do? That is a different question. It only shows what we have discussed shows don't emulate them. Unworthy of emulation. Only one point is that if something has to be learned from China, that is, it may not, what leads to success may not be free capitalism, but state-supported capitalism. That can be an important lesson. In fact, state-supported capitalism was there in other countries also. Many countries did that. It is not American capitalism. So we need to understand under what conditions capitalism can bring results. That is one thing we can learn from China. We should ask. But the rest is not. It's a bankrupt system. That's just not the way. You know, China spends more money on internal security rather than on army. So whom does Chinese leaders think bigger threat to them? People, not the outsiders. That is unworthy of comparison. Because it can be a nuisance, we will have to see what are the problems and how to relate to that country. It is not how to be like that. We should never aspire to be like that. This is suicidal. They want to be out of it. Why should we be like that? So how to deal with it is a different issue. It is a different question from how to be like him or how not to be like, how to be like him. So that's BRI, whether right or wrong, we need to look at it. I think if it is a defective system, you wait for internal collapse. You don't do anything. Finally, what happened to USSR? Die out of its own internal failure. Show them the truth. Refuse to respect, that is number one. Refuse great power, no. Show your culture, freedom, press, interact. Don't fear them. They fear themselves so much. Why do you fear them? Not necessary. Interact. So they will learn. China also learned so many things from outsiders. It was shocked that the people who are not communist were so much better. And that's how they changed. So let Chinese people learn. Chinese students are learning. So many people are learning. Let them live outside and see how the world is, and they will change. So one can think of as a part of foreign policy, how to create a different China, which is less threatening, which is friendly or whatever. And that may come through interaction rather than making it an enemy. It's like that. We will look into it.
Sir, Chinese state-controlled capitalism, why was it a success? Is it because of effective investments in something which gave them more profits, or what exactly are the advantages?
They are able to do many things in a disciplined way. We'll look into that. Okay, now Japan. Japan is an amazing country. We have seen how Japan changes so fast. And in World War II, 2 million died in Japan. Japanese died. Economy ruined. And it was occupied by America. Japan was occupied. And it was supervised by General Douglas MacArthur. Okay. A native civilian government was allowed, Japanese government. And then that government carried many reforms. Parliament became important. Emperor only a symbol. Earlier, emperor had many powers because they followed their constitution on German model, Bismarck's constitution. And Japan forever renounces war as a sovereign right of the nation. See, it was a great declaration. And then it would have only a small army, but protected by the US. And top war leaders of World War II were prosecuted. And then land reforms were introduced. Tax reforms were introduced to create a more egalitarian society. So what you need to understand here is that America bombed during the World War II, but now one American, under Americans' supervision, when Japanese government was doing all these reforms. Forever renounced war after such a desperate, energetic fight during the war. They accepted US alliance and US nuclear umbrella was extended. And in return, US to have naval as well as military bases. And one prime minister, Shigeru Yoshida, who was the prime minister between 1946-7 and 48-54, gave what later came to be called Yoshida Doctrine. What did this doctrine mean? Military spending to confine to only 1% of GDP. And importance to economy and trade. How could they spend so less? Because they are depending on US. And interestingly, though US was pressurizing the Japan to spend more on military, Japan refused to spend military spending. See, look, they can simply change from one extreme to other extreme. And then it happened, huge economic progress because of high saving rate, disciplined workforce, highly educated workforce, government supported business, and focus on technology. 10% growth between 1950 and 75. So Japan grew 10% between 1950 and 75. So by 75, by 85, it was second in GDP. Though country was so small. Whereas China was in a very bad position by 1980. It introduced reforms in 80s and it saw 9% growth between 84 to 2008. So during 80s, Japan was far more sound economically. And Japan moved towards less energy because it didn't have energy resources, fewer raw materials because it didn't have, and moved towards high technology. High technology facilitated by highly educated population. So one small country becomes second largest economy in the world and chooses to remain very, very peaceful, refusing to spend on military. So look at it. First it was isolated, then it understood somebody was doing better, modernized, wanted to be like European, and then became like that, so aggressive during World War II, and completely changed. It understood it was not military and it should be economy, and became powerful economy. Okay. And I think it really reached what may be possible given our thinking, economic and political thinking, because from 1990s, growth was less, 1.3% growth during 1990-2002. From 1990s, people say Japan was declining. But in what sense they were declining? Not by any objective criteria of what makes a good life. They are healthy, educated, living long, wealthy. Okay. And the GNP grew so much that percentage growth after that becomes slow. When the GNP is less, you grow fast. But when GNP is huge, you grow less. And plus, as a part of the development, they don't want, their population growth came down because people don't want to have more children. So population growth came down. So it meant elderly population increased. And even after that, this is only third largest economy, China being the second. Many think, how should Japan grow? Do you know, policies that others normally adopt, Japan has adopted, but not able to come out of this. It adopted fiscal policies, which normally may mean spending. It spent so much. It only got into debt trouble. It has huge debt. Monetary policies. Monetary policies mean reduce interest rate so that people will spend more. Japan gave negative interest rate. So less than 0. So, but still it is not out of it. So I think that Japan has reached what can possibly be reached within the academic tools, and Japan has probably nobody to follow now. So not anybody to advise it. Okay. So that seems to be the case of Japan. You can tell me what you think. Is it clear, Gayatri?
Yes, sir. I am not in a position to speak. Yes.
Okay. Is it clear, Deepti? Deepika?
Yes, sir. Sir, can more countries?
Because usually you people read that see Japan is not growing, and then lower growth is what is the problem? What to do? Think of people. Elderly population, not growing population, wealthy, healthy. What to do now? So that's why I think it just reached the pinnacle. So now China is growing. China is growing because China was poor. China had huge population because it was poor. So China is becoming number 1. And after that, Latin America. And in the end, Africa will become number 1. Like Europe is not number 1 now. Why? Because it reached its natural growth. So it has to go down only. Because people don't want to reproduce themselves and they want to militarily spend much, produce much. You know, they have seen the best. So how can you read Japan as a problem? So much literature and on what is happening in Japan. What is happening in Japan? They reached the last point and they're happy. What's your problem? Okay, Deepika.
So can more countries adopt spending less on military?
Exactly. That's what they should do. India should do that. Spend less. You don't need military dictatorship to spend less. Spend less. Don't make Pakistan enemy. Solve the problem. Don't make China as the enemy. Solve the problem. It's very easy. Spend less. Prioritize. So it is just that Japan learns very fast. Look at it. It didn't make America the enemy. Though it was America that hit Japan most. People don't write, but look at the way Japan reacted, responded to change. It just accepted US leadership. They didn't say, you did this to us during World War II and you apologize. We will settle scores one day with you. We will bomb your cities. No. They said, you provide the security. It is your task to provide security. You give us a nuclear protection. Amazing intelligence. So when they were killing so many people, I just see them as just learn from somebody. That's all. Not that they were bad people. So the change is, the shocking thing is not on just how it got modernized and how it became powerful, but how it changed after World War II. And becoming second largest in the world is economic. What more is there for a small country? That's all. That is the end of what we know. That is why economics is not working. Keynesian economics of monetary policy, they're not working. So let us not regard Japan as a problem. Why is it only third? When is it going to? Others are overtaking it. Let others overtake. Japan has seen. Should an elderly man complain that his son is overtaking? No. Elderly man had his own day, and his son should overtake. That is the nature. So some other country should be superpower now economically. Let it be so. Elderly Japan should watch. Okay, we were once like you. So let Africa be superpower. As nations become wiser, they get out of this superpower status and let Africa be superpower. That's all. That's the world should move. In fact, that's what it is also moving. The main problem is demography. As you develop more, they're not willing to have more children because they're thinking, why should I live like this? They're less nationalistic, more tolerant and wiser. Okay. But why US is different? US is different because to US so many people go. So it's different. It's constantly changing population. So why should one complain that it is only third largest and it was displaced from the second largest? Why should GNP be the criteria? Why should the growth be criteria? Look at the people, they have reached the best given economic theories. Deepika, you wanted to ask something?
Sir, so innovation is what is helping Japan.
Exactly. Innovation. Japan did that innovation. Made in Japan. It's highly standardized.
So that is the strategy for the future as well, to maintain a certain growth.
Exactly.
And at the same time, the competition is increasing, and we see in news that they have work pressure. I mean, it's excess in Japan.
That's true. So, which means that they should reduce, not that they should work more, isn't it? Maybe evaluating an economy in terms of only GNP or evaluating a country only in terms of GNP is wrong. So let it grow less. So there may be problems in Japan, but I think in a broader framework of what nations are doing, I think maybe Japan has reached its best in terms of the goals that other nations usually aspire for. So again, it's a huge change, right? From being so aggressive to peaceful state.
They don't have a religion as in state religion. So
they don't have, but now different cults are coming, different cults. Japanese society is experimenting many things, which includes porn industry, prostitution, religious cults, new kinds of religions. Japanese society also is changing. I don't know much, but I'm only looking at broadly nation, military power and economic power in terms of GNP and how things have how Japan seemed to have achieved what normally countries aspire for. And so you can't apply the same criteria to Japan and then say grow further. That is not the point. That's what I'm saying. So in what way Japanese society should change and what should be the goals is a different thing. Probably now the problem of Japan is that it has nobody to copy. That may be the problem.